Lonely Rancher helped a silent native pass through the valley. Months later, warriors brought him a message from the ancients. The message arrived with the first snow of winter, carried by 3 solemn warriors who spoke in whispers and watched the sky as if expecting spirits to descend from the storm clouds. Benjamin Whitehorse stood on his porch, reading words carved into sacred birch bark that would change everything he believed about the world and his place in it. The silent old man he had helped cross the valley 6 months ago had not been just another traveler, and the simple kindness Benjamin had shown would now bind him to a destiny older than the mountains themselves. Benjamin Whitehorse had chosen the name when he settled in the remote valley of northern Wyoming, leaving behind his birth name of Benjamin Murphy and the memories of a life that had brought him nothing but sorrow. At 38, he was a man seeking redemption through isolation, building a ranch in a place so remote that weeks could pass without seeing another human soul. The valley was perfect for his purposes: fertile grass for cattle, clean water from mountain streams, and surrounded by peaks so rugged that few travelers ever attempted to cross them. The ranch house was a testament to Benjamin's determination to start fresh. Built from local stone and timber, it stood like a fortress against the elements, while maintaining the simple elegance of someone who valued function over ornament. Behind the house, a large barn sheltered his horses and equipment, while carefully constructed corrals held the small herd of cattle that represented his attempt to build something lasting and worthwhile. Benjamin had purchased the land from the territorial government 5 years earlier, but he understood that paper ownership meant little in a region where Shoshone, Crow, and Blackfoot bands had roamed for countless generations. He had made it his practice to show respect for the indigenous history of the valley, learning what he could about traditional uses of the land and always offering hospitality to any tribal members who passed through his territory. The encounter that would change his life had occurred on a warm day in late spring, when Benjamin was working to repair a section of fence damaged by winter storms. The sound of approaching horses made him look up from his work, expecting to see familiar faces from the scattered ranching community that was slowly developing in the region. Instead, he saw something that made him catch his breath in wonder. 3 riders approached along the old game trail that wound through the valley floor. 2 were clearly warriors in the prime of life, carrying themselves with the alertness and dignity that marked experienced fighters. But it was the 3rd rider who commanded Benjamin's attention. He appeared to be ancient beyond measure, his deeply lined face speaking of decades of wisdom and experience. His long white hair flowed down his back like a waterfall of moonlight, and his dark eyes held depths that seemed to see far beyond the present moment. What struck Benjamin most powerfully was the absolute silence that surrounded the old man. His horse made no sound as it moved, no leather creaked, no metal jangled. Even the birds seemed to quiet their songs as the mysterious figure passed beneath them. It was as if the very air held its breath in the presence of someone who commanded respect from the natural world itself. The 2 warriors pulled up when they saw Benjamin, speaking briefly in a language he did not recognize before one of them rode forward to address him in accented but clear English. "We seek passage through your valley," the warrior said formally. "Our elder travels to the sacred places in the eastern mountains. We ask permission to cross your land with respect and peace." Benjamin set down his tools and walked over to meet them, struck by the courtesy of the request. Many travelers simply assumed they had the right to cross private property, but these men showed a consideration that spoke well of their character. "You are welcome to pass through," Benjamin replied. "The old trails are still clear, and there is good water at several points along the way." The warrior nodded gratefully and turned to translate for his companions. The ancient elder listened carefully, then fixed his penetrating gaze on Benjamin's face. For a long moment, they studied each other in silence, and Benjamin had the strange sensation that he was being measured by standards he could not understand. Finally, the old man spoke in a voice like wind through autumn leaves. The warrior translated his words with obvious reverence. "Grandfather says you have the look of one who carries old pain, but seeks to heal it through honest work. He asks if you would share food with us before we continue our journey." Benjamin was surprised by the personal nature of the observation, but something about the elder's presence made him want to offer whatever hospitality he could provide. "I would be honored to share my table with you." They dismounted near Benjamin's house, and he quickly prepared a simple meal from his stores of preserved meat, fresh bread, and vegetables from his garden. As they ate, the two warriors shared stories of their travels and their people, while the ancient elder sat in contemplative silence, occasionally nodding or making soft sounds of approval. "What is your elder's name?" Benjamin asked during a pause in the conversation. The warriors exchanged glances before one of them answered. "He is known by many names among many peoples. Some call him Keeper of the Old Ways. Others know him as the one who speaks with the spirits of the ancestors. But his true name is sacred and not spoken lightly to outsiders." Benjamin nodded, understanding that he was in the presence of someone who held special significance in native culture. He had heard stories of medicine men and spiritual leaders who commanded extraordinary respect, but he had never encountered one personally. As the afternoon wore on, Benjamin found himself drawn into conversation with the elder through his interpreters. The old man asked thoughtful questions about Benjamin's life in the valley, his treatment of the land, and his relationships with the animals and plants that shared his territory. The questions seemed to probe deeper than mere curiosity, as if the elder was conducting some kind of spiritual assessment. "Grandfather wants to know why you chose to live alone in this sacred valley," one warrior translated. "He senses that you are running from something, but also that you are seeking something important." Benjamin considered his answer carefully. "I came here because I needed a place to heal from old wounds. I have found peace in the work of building something good from nothing, and in learning to live in harmony with the natural world." The elder listened to the translation intently, then spoke again at greater length. The warrior's face showed surprise as he listened, and he hesitated before translating the response. "Grandfather says that the spirits of this valley have accepted you as a guardian. He sees that you treat the land with respect, and that you have opened your heart to its teachings. He believes that you have been brought here for a purpose that will become clear in time." Benjamin felt a chill run down his spine at these words. He had indeed felt a deep connection to the valley from the moment he first saw it, as if he belonged there in a way that went beyond mere legal ownership. But hearing this confirmed by someone who clearly possessed extraordinary spiritual insight was both humbling and unsettling. As evening approached, the travelers prepared to continue their journey. The elder rose from the table and walked over to where Benjamin stood, studying his face once more with those penetrating dark eyes. Then, to Benjamin's surprise, the old man reached into a leather pouch and withdrew a small object which he pressed into Benjamin's hand. It was a piece of polished stone, carved with intricate symbols that seemed to shift and flow in the lamplight. The stone was warm to the touch, as if it held some inner fire, and Benjamin could feel a subtle vibration emanating from its surface. "Grandfather gives you this as a token of friendship and respect," the warrior translated. "He says it will help you understand when the time comes for you to fulfill your destiny in this place." Before Benjamin could ask what the cryptic message meant, the three riders had mounted their horses and disappeared into the gathering dusk. He stood on his porch for a long time afterward, holding the mysterious stone and wondering what had just transpired. The encounter felt more like a dream than reality, except for the tangible evidence of the carved stone that now rested in his palm. In the months that followed, Benjamin found himself thinking often about the ancient elder and his strange words about destiny and purpose. The stone became a constant companion, carried in his pocket during the day and kept on his bedside table at night. Sometimes he could swear that it grew warmer when he faced difficult decisions, as if offering guidance through its mysterious properties. Life in the valley continued its peaceful rhythm through the summer and into the fall. Benjamin's cattle thrived on the rich grass, his crops produced abundant harvests, and he found deep satisfaction in the daily work of maintaining and improving his property. But beneath the surface of routine activities, he remained aware of a growing sense that something significant was approaching. The first indication that his life was about to change again came with the arrival of autumn, when Benjamin began to notice unusual activity among the wildlife in the valley. Animals that normally avoided human habitation began appearing near his ranch house, watching him with intelligent eyes before disappearing back into the wilderness. Eagles circled overhead with greater frequency, and he often woke at night to the sound of wolves singing in the distant hills. The phenomenon intensified as winter approached, until Benjamin sometimes felt like he was living at the center of a vast gathering of creatures, all waiting for some signal he could not understand. The carved stone in his pocket seemed to pulse with increasing energy, and his dreams began to fill with images of ancient ceremonies and spiritual rituals that felt familiar despite being completely foreign to his experience. The message finally came on the first day of heavy snow, when 3 warriors rode into his yard as silently as the falling flakes themselves. Benjamin recognized none of them as the men who had accompanied the elder months earlier, but their bearing and the reverence with which they approached him made it clear that they came on a mission of great importance. "Benjamin Whitehorse," the leader said, using the name Benjamin had taken when he settled in the valley. "We bring word from the keeper of the old ways. He has passed beyond the veil, but before his spirit departed, he left instructions for you." Benjamin felt a profound sadness at the news of the elder's death, even though he had spoken with the man for only a few hours. There had been something about the ancient figure that suggested permanence and continuity with the distant past, and his absence left the world feeling somehow diminished. "What were his instructions?" Benjamin asked quietly. The warrior reached into his leather pouch and withdrew a piece of birch bark covered with intricate carvings similar to those on the stone Benjamin carried. As he handed it over, Benjamin noticed that the symbols seemed to glow faintly in the pale winter light. "Before his death, Grandfather spoke with the spirits of the ancestors who dwell in the sacred places of this valley," the warrior explained. "They revealed to him that a great change is coming to this land, a time when the old ways and the new ways must find harmony, or both will be lost forever." Benjamin studied the carved symbols, finding that their meaning seemed to flow directly into his mind without the need for translation. It was as if the stone he carried was serving as a key to unlock understanding of this ancient form of communication. "The ancestors have chosen you to be a bridge between the worlds," the warrior continued. "Your respect for the land and its original inhabitants has marked you as one who can help preserve the sacred knowledge while adapting to the changes that cannot be stopped." Benjamin looked up from the birchbark message, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was being asked of him. "I am just a rancher trying to live peacefully in a beautiful valley. I do not have the wisdom or knowledge to take on such a responsibility." "The ancestors do not choose those who think themselves ready," the warrior replied with a slight smile. "They choose those whose hearts are open to learning and whose actions show respect for all living things. You have proven yourself worthy through your daily choices, not through grand gestures or declarations." The warrior went on to explain that representatives from several tribal nations would be arriving over the coming months to share knowledge and traditions that needed to be preserved for future generations. Benjamin's ranch would serve as a neutral meeting ground where ancient wisdom could be recorded and protected, while new forms of cooperation between indigenous and settler communities could be explored. "But why here?" Benjamin asked. "Why this valley? Because this place has always been sacred," the warrior replied. "Long before any of our peoples arrived here, it was recognized as a place where the barrier between the physical and spiritual worlds was thin. The ancestors who dwell here have been waiting for someone who could serve as their voice in the changing world." As the warriors prepared to leave, their leader turned back to Benjamin with one final message. "Grandfather said you would know what to do when the time came. Trust the wisdom of the stone he gave you, and remember that you are not alone in this task. The spirits of the valley will guide you, and representatives of many nations will come to offer their support." Benjamin watched the 3 riders disappear into the swirling snow, then looked down at the birchbark message in his hands. The symbols continued to glow softly, and as he concentrated on their meaning, he began to understand the full scope of what lay ahead. Over the following weeks, the promised visitors began to arrive. They came singly and in small groups, representing diverse tribal nations from across the Western Territories. Each brought sacred knowledge, oral histories, and ceremonial objects that needed to be preserved against the possibility that traditional ways of life might not survive the rapid changes sweeping across the continent. Benjamin found himself transformed from a solitary rancher into the keeper of a repository of indigenous wisdom. His barn was converted into a meeting hall where elders could gather to share stories and conduct ceremonies. His house became a library where traditional knowledge was carefully recorded in both native languages and English to ensure its survival for future generations. The work was both humbling and inspiring. Benjamin learned about medicinal plants that could cure diseases unknown to white doctors, about astronomical observations that rivaled the best scientific instruments, and about spiritual practices that connected human beings to the natural world in ways that mainstream society had forgotten. Each conversation expanded his understanding of the richness and complexity of indigenous cultures. But perhaps most importantly, Benjamin discovered that his role was not simply to collect and preserve knowledge, but to help forge new relationships between native and non-native communities based on mutual respect and shared stewardship of the land. His ranch became a place where traditional ecological wisdom could be combined with modern ranching techniques to create more sustainable and harmonious approaches to land use. As winter deepened into spring, Benjamin realized that his life had taken on a purpose he could never have imagined when he first sought refuge in the remote valley. The painful isolation that had driven him to this place had been transformed into meaningful connection with communities and traditions that reached back thousands of years. The carved stone that the ancient elder had given him remained his constant companion, its warmth and subtle vibration serving as a reminder of the sacred trust that had been placed in his hands. Sometimes, when he held it during the evening ceremonies that had become a regular part of life at the ranch, Benjamin could swear that he felt the presence of the old man who had set him on this extraordinary path. "Did you know this would happen when you first met me?" Benjamin asked aloud one night, speaking to the memory of the elder as he stood on his porch under a sky brilliant with stars. The answer came not in words, but in a feeling of deep contentment and rightness that filled his heart. The ancient spirits of the valley had indeed chosen well when they guided a lonely rancher to help a silent traveler cross their sacred land. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness ripple outward in ways that change the world, and Benjamin Whitehorse had become living proof that destiny often arrives disguised as ordinary human decency. The lonely rancher, who had once sought only solitude and healing, had found something far more valuable. A purpose that connected him to the deepest roots of the land he called home, and to the eternal cycle of wisdom passing from one generation to the next. In helping preserve the voices of the ancestors, he had discovered his own voice and his place in the great story that continues to unfold across the sacred landscapes of the American West. As he prepared for sleep that night, Benjamin placed the carved stone on his bedside table and smiled at the memory of 3 riders appearing out of the gathering dusk months ago. Tomorrow would bring new visitors, new stories, and new responsibilities, but he faced them with confidence born of knowing that he was exactly where he was meant to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. The message from the ancients had been delivered, and Benjamin Whitehorse was ready to spend the rest of his life honoring the trust they had placed in him. In a world rapidly changing and often losing its connection to the wisdom of the past, one remote valley in Wyoming had become a bridge between worlds, tended by a man who had learned that true wealth lay not in isolation, but in serving something greater than himself.